I never thought something as simple as an ultrasound could change everything. But when the doctor froze, looked at me with confusion, and asked, "Who is the father?" I thought I was hearing things. I tried to laugh it off, thinking he was joking, but then he turned the screen towards me. What I saw in that moment, I'll never forget it. And within 2 hours, I was on the phone with a lawyer. My name is Hannah Collins, and I was about to be a first-time mom. I'd waited for this moment for what felt like forever. At 32, I thought I had my life together. I had a stable job, a loving partner, and the excitement of starting a family. Tom, my boyfriend, was just as excited. Or so I thought. I was sitting in the doctor's office, hands resting on my stomach, looking at the ultrasound screen, waiting to see my baby for the first time. My mom, Linda, was sitting beside me, holding my hand. She'd been there for me through everything. She was my rock, and I could always count on her. "Are you nervous?" she asked, smiling at me. "Not really," I said, though my heart was racing a bit. "It just feels unreal." The room smelled like antiseptic, but I wasn't focused on that. I was focused on the tiny image on the screen, waiting for the doctor to confirm that everything was okay. My stomach was still flat, but soon enough, this baby would change everything. The sound of the ultrasound machine hummed quietly as Dr. Stevens moved the wand around my belly. He was a calm, experienced man who had done countless ultrasounds. But today, something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but his silence felt heavier than usual. I glanced over at my mom, who was still smiling, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's a girl, isn't it?" she asked, trying to guess the gender. "I'm betting on a girl. I don't know. We'll see," I said, feeling the flutter of excitement. But there was this strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Maybe it was just nerves, but something felt wrong. Dr. Stevens didn't answer right away. He kept looking at the screen, his face hard to read. I thought maybe he was just focused, but then he stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he turned towards me. I thought he was about to say something about the baby's position, or maybe the measurements, but instead, he asked a question I didn't expect. "Who is the father?" he said, looking from the screen to me. I paused, blinking, unsure if I heard him right. "What do you mean?" "It's Tom, of course." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned the screen toward me and said, "Look at this." The room seemed to freeze around me. My heart began to race. I looked at the screen, thinking maybe he was showing me a clearer image of the baby. But that's not what I saw. The picture didn't show a single baby. There were two babies. I couldn't believe it. My mouth went dry, and I felt a wave of dizziness rush over me. My eyes went back to the screen, then back to Dr. Stevens, and then to my mom, who was just as stunned. "Twins," I whispered. "But how?" Dr. Stevens was silent for a moment, his expression serious. "Yes, Hannah, you're having twins, and there's something else I need to show you." I tried to make sense of it, but the words didn't seem to fit in my head. I had no idea I was having twins, and that wasn't the only shock I had coming. I turned to my mom, and I could see her face shift from excitement to concern. The room suddenly felt colder. It was no longer just a moment of joy. Something wasn't right, and that's when I started to feel it. The nagging suspicion I had pushed aside for so long. Something was off. The initial shock of seeing two babies on the ultrasound screen hit me like a tidal wave. For a few moments, I couldn't process what I was seeing. My mind raced. Twins? How could this be possible? I had only ever been told I was pregnant with one baby. It wasn't like I hadn't had regular checkups. I had been to all my appointments, and everything had seemed perfectly normal until now. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the screen, and I could feel the heat rising in my face. The ultrasound technician didn't seem to understand my confusion. He seemed more concerned than I was, which made me even more anxious. There was something else in the room, an underlying tension that I hadn't noticed before. His eyes flicked back and forth between the screen and me, as though waiting for me to catch up, but I was still trying to comprehend the sudden revelation. "Wait," I said, my voice shaky. "How could I be having twins? I've never had any indication of this. No one told me." Dr. Stevens finally broke the silence. "I know, Hannah. This is unexpected." His voice had a note of hesitation in it, something I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't the calm, steady voice I had heard during all my previous visits. Something about the way he said it, unexpected, set off an alarm bell in my mind. What was he really trying to tell me? I felt the room spin, the walls suddenly feeling smaller, tighter. My breath caught in my throat, and I had to blink a few times to clear the dizziness clouding my vision. 2 babies? But no one had even hinted at that possibility. I'd heard stories from friends about the surprise of finding out they were expecting twins, but this felt different. I wasn't excited or surprised in the way I thought I would be. Instead, I was filled with an overwhelming sense of dread, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't see, waiting for it to swallow me whole. "Dr. Stevens," I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. "Are you sure?" He nodded slowly, his expression serious. "Yes, Hannah, the ultrasound is clear. You're having twins, but there's something else I need to show you." I didn't understand. How could I be having twins without anyone noticing? I had gone through so many tests, been to so many appointments, and no one had ever said anything. No one had even hinted that there could be more than one baby. And I hadn't felt anything unusual. I knew the signs of pregnancy: nausea, weight gain, the usual aches and pains. And I had felt everything I was supposed to feel. There had been no double the movement, no extra signs of a second baby. I tried to focus on the screen, my eyes darting between the 2 tiny figures. But as I looked more closely, my stomach tightened in a way I couldn't explain. There was a slight discomfort in my chest, as though the air in the room had suddenly thickened. And then Dr. Stevens said it, the words I wasn't ready to hear. "Hannah, look here." He pointed at the screen, his finger tracing the image of the second baby. "You see this baby? There's something off. It doesn't match the father's DNA profile." My breath stopped. What did he just say? I felt like someone had slapped me. I could hardly breathe. The idea that one of the babies could be someone else's, that it could be a result of a mistake, a betrayal, was beyond anything I had ever imagined. My eyes flicked back to Dr. Stevens, then to the screen, and then to my mom, who was staring in disbelief. For a long moment, there was silence in the room. The hum of the machine and the soft beeping of the monitor were the only sounds filling the space. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, and I wasn't sure if I was going to faint or scream. I had to swallow hard to keep the tears from welling up. How was this possible? "Hannah, I know this is a lot to process," Dr. Stevens said gently, "but we're going to get to the bottom of this. I just need to confirm a few things with you. You're certain of the father, right?" I tried to hold it together, but my mind was racing. "Of course. It's Tom. I don't understand. What do you mean the father's DNA?" Dr. Stevens hesitated again. "I'm afraid we need to run a few tests to be sure. But what I'm seeing here, it's telling me there's something I need to address." The world felt like it was closing in on me. I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, to say this was all a mistake, but I couldn't shake the cold sweat forming on my skin. It was like everything I knew, everything I had believed about my relationship with Tom, was now in question. Was there something I didn't know? Something I'd been blind to? As the doctor continued explaining, I felt like I was hearing his words through a thick fog. His voice was distant, and I couldn't focus on what he was saying. All I could think about was that moment, the feeling of betrayal, of doubt, and the sudden realization that everything was about to change. This wasn't just about the babies anymore. This was about my life, my relationship, and everything I thought I knew. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in around me, The excitement I'd once felt about becoming a mother had turned into a quiet storm of panic and confusion. I couldn't stop the thoughts racing through my mind. How long had this been going on? Had Tom been hiding something from me? Was I really the only one who didn't know the truth? I couldn't even bring myself to look at my mom. I could feel her eyes on me, full of concern, but I couldn't meet her gaze. Not now, not with everything swirling inside me. Dr. Stevens' words finally broke through the fog, but they were the last thing I wanted to hear. We need to discuss the next steps. You have options, Hannah, but you need to know everything before making any decisions. And in that moment, I realized I didn't know anything anymore. Not about the babies, not about Tom, not about my life. The weight of Dr. Stevens' words lingered in the air like a storm cloud. The room felt suffocating, and I could barely breathe. All I wanted was to understand what was happening, but no matter how many times I tried to process it, it didn't make sense. Twins? That was a shock enough. But now, the suggestion that one of them might not be Tom's. I felt like I was losing control of everything. How had I gotten here? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Dr. Stevens's calm demeanor only added to the confusion. His voice was steady, but I could hear the underlying concern, almost as if he was tiptoeing around something that he wasn't ready to fully explain yet. His words echoed in my head. We need to confirm the father's DNA profile. The possibility that the child I thought was Tom's might belong to someone else was too much to process in that moment. I looked at the screen again, my gaze falling on the two small figures that I should have been overjoyed to see. Instead, they were foreign to me. Everything felt off-kilter. My heart was racing, but I tried to calm myself. I turned to look at my mom, who had been so silent throughout this whole ordeal. Her face was pale, and her eyes filled with worry, but there was nothing she could say. I could feel her concern for me in the tightness of her grip on my hand, but the confusion in her expression mirrored my own. She didn't know what to say, and neither did I. I knew I had to get out of that office, away from the sterile smell of antiseptic and the coldness of the ultrasound room. My hands were trembling as I pulled my coat on, trying to hold myself together. I needed space. I needed time to think, to figure out how to process this, and I certainly wasn't going to do it in front of Dr. Stevens. As we left the office, the weight of what had just happened sat heavily on my chest. It felt like 1,000 pounds pressing down on me, and I couldn't seem to shake it off. I climbed into the car, my mom following me, and for a moment, we sat in silence. My eyes were fixed on the road, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment over and over again. Tom's face flashed in my mind. We had been so happy, or at least I thought we were. We'd talked about having kids for years. We'd made plans. And now it felt like my entire world had turned upside down. What if Tom wasn't the father? What if I had been lying to myself, living in a fantasy? I turned to my mom, my voice breaking the silence. Mom, what if I'm wrong about everything? I hated the doubt in my voice, but it was there, creeping in like a shadow I couldn't escape. My mom looked at me, her eyes soft and understanding. Honey, don't jump to conclusions. We don't know anything for sure yet. You need to find out more. And then, and only then, should you make any decisions. She was right, of course. I couldn't let my mind spiral without having all the facts. But how could I just sit back and wait? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and the thought of confronting Tom was terrifying. How could I even bring this up? Would he understand? Or would it be the end of everything we had? I knew what I had to do next, even if I didn't want to admit it. I had to speak to Tom, but more than that, I needed answers. Answers that only a professional could provide. I couldn't handle this alone, and I needed someone who could help me navigate the storm that was about to hit. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that there was only one way forward. I had to call a lawyer. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but I couldn't ignore the reality anymore. What if Tom wasn't the father? If something had happened that I didn't know about, I needed to protect myself and my future. I needed to know what my legal rights were, especially if there were implications for custody or paternity. I reached for my phone, my hands still shaking as I dialed. The number I had saved for the lawyer I'd met once before, the one who had helped me with some small legal matters in the past, now seemed to be the only lifeline I had. I waited for what felt like an eternity before the phone rang, and then her voice broke through the tension. "This is Diane," she said, her voice calm and professional. "How can I help you?" I didn't waste any time. "I need help. Something has happened and I don't know what to do. I found out today that I'm having twins, but there's something else. There's something about the paternity of one of the babies that doesn't add up. I need advice. I don't even know where to start." The silence on the other end felt like an eternity. I could hear Diane take a deep breath before she spoke again, her tone much more serious now. "Okay, Hannah, I understand. First, let's make sure we get all the facts. Don't make any decisions yet, but let's talk about your options. We'll figure this out together." It wasn't much, but hearing those words felt like a small weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't alone anymore. Diane would guide me through this. As I hung up, I looked at my mom, who was now staring at me, her face filled with concern, but also a glimmer of hope. "I'm going to figure this out, Mom. I promise." The words didn't sound convincing even to me, but I had to say them. I had to believe that I could face whatever was coming. The truth would come out, one way or another, and I had to be ready for whatever that might be. The minutes following my call with the lawyer were a blur. I had told myself I would be calm, that I wouldn't let my emotions get the better of me, but nothing had prepared me for the sheer emotional storm I was about to face. The uncertainty, the dread, the crushing confusion, it all weighed on me like a boulder. I barely heard my mom's voice as she reassured me, though I could tell she was just as shaken as I was. She had always been my rock, but now I could see the worry in her eyes, a worry that mirrored my own. I had told myself that the ultrasound had been a mistake, that Dr. Stevens had misinterpreted the images, that it was all a simple misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. There was no way I could ignore what was happening. My world was unraveling, piece by piece, and I couldn't control any of it. The ultrasound, the unexpected twins, the question of paternity, it was too much to take in. But it was the sudden, undeniable reality of what might be the truth that hit me the hardest. The overwhelming thought that perhaps Tom wasn't the father of one of the babies was impossible to escape. It felt like time was moving too fast. The day felt like it was slipping through my fingers, and all I could do was clutch at whatever semblance of control I had left. I had no choice but to confront Tom, but I wasn't sure how. How could I even begin to tell him what had happened? How could I say, "I think one of the babies might not be yours"? I didn't know where to start, but I knew I had to face him. There was no escaping the truth anymore. Tom had just come home from work, looking exhausted, his face etched with the familiar tension of the day. He smiled when he saw me, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't the same smile I had grown used to, the one that reassured me everything was okay. I could feel something was off with him, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The thought that maybe he already knew, or worse, that he was hiding something, made my stomach twist with nausea. "Hannah, hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice tentative, almost as if he was unsure how to approach me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't waste any more time pretending everything was fine. This wasn't something I could keep to myself, not anymore. "No, Tom, I'm not okay," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "We need to talk." His brow furrowed in confusion as he moved closer, but I stepped back, needing some space. I could feel the tension between us thickening, a gap forming where there had once been trust. This wasn't just a conversation. It was the start of something much bigger, something I wasn't ready to face. "I went to the ultrasound today," I began, trying to find the right words, but everything sounded wrong. And, well, The doctor said something that I wasn't expecting. He told me I'm having twins. Tom blinked in surprise, but his expression was more curious than anything. He stepped closer, his voice soft. Twins? That's amazing, babe. I nodded, trying to hold it together. Yeah, but that's not the worst part. There's something else. The doctor said something about the paternity of one of the babies. He said the DNA doesn't match. Tom, I don't understand what's going on. The doctor said one of the babies might not be yours. The words hung in the air like a deadly weight. I could see the shock hit Tom's face as soon as I said it. His mouth went dry, and his eyes widened. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply stood there, frozen, as if the words didn't make sense to him either. And I could tell, I could see it in his eyes, that he didn't know how to respond. You're kidding, right? He finally stammered, shaking his head in disbelief. What do you mean? I don't understand. That can't be possible. I wish I could explain it, I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. But the doctor was serious. He showed me the ultrasound. I don't know how this happened, but something is wrong. I don't know who the other father is, but it's not you. Tom stepped back, his face drained of color. He looked at me as if I had slapped him. His eyes searched mine for any sign that I was joking, that this was some cruel joke I was playing, but it was clear that I wasn't. This was real. It was happening, and it was too much for both of us to process at once. Why are you just telling me this now? He asked, his voice low and hurt. Why didn't you say something earlier? Why didn't you? Because I didn't know. I didn't know anything until today. I interrupted, my voice rising despite myself. I'm just as shocked as you are, Tom. I don't know what to believe. I didn't ask for this to happen. But now I have to deal with it. The room was silent for what felt like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. This was it. The moment everything changed. The foundation of my relationship, my future, everything I thought I knew about my life was crumbling in front of me. Finally, Tom spoke again, his voice trembling. I don't know what to say. I don't know what's happening, but I'll be here. I'll do whatever it takes to figure this out. Okay? We'll find the truth together. His words felt empty, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling me. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I could see that he was afraid of the truth, afraid of what it meant for us. But that didn't change the fact that this was my reality now. There was no going back. I'll call the lawyer, I said softly, my voice steady now. We'll figure this out. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty, confusion, and gut-wrenching emotions. After that conversation with Tom, everything in our lives seemed to spiral into chaos. The truth had shattered the fragile foundation I had spent years building. The dream of a perfect family, of being the happy couple with our baby, was slipping further away by the minute. In the beginning, I tried to put on a brave face. I forced myself to focus on the practical steps, calling the lawyer, arranging the paternity tests, meeting with Dr. Stevens to get more information. But behind it all, I could feel the weight of what had happened sinking deeper into my chest. Every time I looked at the ultrasound pictures, every time I thought about the babies growing inside me, I was reminded of the enormous unknowns in my life. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown that haunted me. It was the sense of betrayal that I couldn't shake. The thought that one of my children might not be Tom's kept me awake at night, my mind racing through every possible scenario. The more I tried to process it, the more questions I had, and the more I felt like I was drowning in a sea of unanswered questions. Could it have been a mistake? Could something have gone wrong with the ultrasound? But deep down, I knew better. The reality was hard to face, but it was becoming increasingly clear. I had to confront the truth, no matter how painful it was. The lawyer I had called, Diane, was incredibly helpful. She guided me through every step of the process, explaining everything in detail. The paternity test was set up, and within a few days, I would have the answers I desperately needed. But I couldn't help feeling the weight of what was about to happen. This was a pivotal moment in my life, and whatever the results were, they would change everything. Part of me feared the worst, but another part of me held on to a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this was all some sort of misunderstanding. Maybe the twins were Tom's after all. But even as I clung to that hope, the reality of the situation was hard to ignore. Tom and I had always been close, but this felt like a betrayal I couldn't fully understand. The trust I had in him, the connection we had built over the years, was now in question. It wasn't just the paternity of the babies that hung in the balance. It was the future of our relationship. Could we ever go back to the way things were? Could I trust him again, no matter what the results said? Or had everything I thought I knew about us been an illusion? I didn't know what the future would hold, but one thing became clear. I couldn't live in the shadows of uncertainty forever. I needed answers. But more than that, I needed closure. Whatever the outcome, I needed to be able to move forward, to take control of my life and my future. I couldn't allow myself to be consumed by the what-ifs and the fears. I had to face the truth, no matter how difficult it was. I had to decide what was best for me and for my babies. As the days passed and the paternity test loomed closer, I found myself thinking about the lessons I had learned so far. First and foremost, I had learned that life is unpredictable. Things can change in an instant, and no matter how carefully we plan, the world can still surprise us. But I also learned something about myself, about my strength, my resilience, and my ability to face the toughest challenges head on. In the face of uncertainty, I had found a new strength I didn't know I had. I wasn't going to let this break me. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I was going to move forward, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. The most important lesson, though, was about trust. Trust is fragile, and it's something that can be easily broken, but it's also something that can be rebuilt, even after it's been shattered. As I sat with my thoughts, I realized that trust wasn't just about other people. It was about trusting myself. I had to trust my instincts, trust that I was doing the best I could for my future and for my children. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was learning to trust the process. I was learning to trust that, no matter what, I would figure it out. In the weeks that followed, the tension between Tom and me was palpable. We tried to carry on with our lives, pretending that everything was okay, but the strain was too much to ignore. We had dinner together, talked about the mundane details of our day, but the elephant in the room was always there, looming over us, making everything feel hollow. The questions about the paternity tests, about the future of our family, couldn't be avoided any longer, but neither of us knew how to talk about it without opening up a whole new set of wounds. I didn't know what would happen when the results came back. I didn't know if the truth would tear us apart or if we would find a way to move forward. But I did know that, whatever happened, I was ready to face it. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let it destroy my future. And more importantly, I wasn't going to let it destroy the future of my children. The truth would come out. I would deal with it. I would rebuild. And no matter what, I would always find a way to move forward, because that's what life demands from us. The courage to face the unknown, the strength to endure the toughest moments, and the resilience to keep going, no matter what. That was the lesson I had learned from all of this. And as painful as it was the lesson that would carry me through the rest of my journey.